20 years old, and from hundreds of years, Ubud Emeritus has charmed the hearts of so many. We have become the region's most important gathering place for global minds, and a testament to the power of storytelling.
I'm just retired, believe it or not, Professor of Sustainability from the UK. I've done that job for 11 years. Prior to that, since 1995, I worked in a field that's called sustainable development, and within business, NGOs, politics, United Nations, and also as a bit of a grassroots activist. But I've quit all of that to move to Indonesia. So now I'm learning how a regenerative farm can survive financially. That's going to be a big project. And I'm also getting into devotional music, and also I've become an essayist for this worldwide movement that's called Deep Adaptation, which I'll talk about in a bit. Thank you.
Excellent.
And, I also got a book out, and it's called Breaking Together, a Freedom-Loving Response to Collapse. Not bedtime reading. So yeah, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, we'll talk about.
I know where he's going to start, that's why.
Hands up if you think you know enough about climate change to make the most wise decisions in your own life for the coming years. How much do you think you feel confident you know enough about climate change? Yeah, so for me, climate change has been in the background, and I realized that I was relying on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to get a sense of what's happening and what it might mean for my life and that of my loved ones and my community and country. I came to realize that was wrong, that the situation had been understated for decades. So the first thing to do as individuals is to look into this yourself with an open mind. And that can only happen if you suspend your desire to feel reassured, to avoid outright panic, to avoid despair, to avoid depression, to avoid not knowing what to do with the rest of your life. Basically, we all know that we're attracted to narratives of ourselves and our world that make us feel better. And that is going to be an impediment for you really considering what's happening in the world right now with the changing climate. And the thing is, that's difficult because we've got, I think now, two very dominant narratives, incredibly well funded and allied to state interests, which are both lying to us. On the one hand, it's what I call the eco-modern narrative, which is climate change is controllable. We just need some investment, some leadership, some technology, entrepreneurship, and we all need to do as we're told, shop a bit differently, hope for the best, and it won't kill us. And most of us will hear that through CNN, BBC, etc., and the IPCC, and okay, fine, that was my world. That was the understanding I had for decades. Now, what's interesting is, post-COVID, perhaps related to the rebellion a lot of people felt about certain policies and uses of science in that period, there's this other narrative, which is backed by the fossil industry, and we know that. They back the Atlas network of think tanks worldwide, and they say, it's a hoax. They're just trying to control you and steal your money and lock you in your houses. And that is spreading massively. And of course, it's very appealing because then you think, well, it's just a few bad people lying to us, a few rich people just who are greedy. These two dominant narratives are both lies. The reality is climate change is proceeding far quicker than any of the mainstream scientists told us. September was 1.8 degrees C above pre-industrial temperatures globally, and it's not about that incremental heat. That means weird weather, destroying crops. The top Austrian modelling organisation, the EASA, top in the world, predicts a multi-breadbasket failure within 1.5 degrees annual temperatures. That means prices of basic grains going through the roof within 3 years from today. That means food riots in many of the countries where you live. That means you're finding it difficult, even more difficult for some of you who are privileged, to put food on the table. Climate change matters to the future stability of where you live. And therefore, what should you do as individuals? Reject the idea that all it means is you need to recycle a bit more. Reject that. We need to look into it, take it seriously. We're citizens, we're community members. Let's actually look at how we can help and how we can engage each other to prepare for a lot of disruptions that are already here for many of us, but are coming for all of us within just the next few years.
Thank you. Jen?
It's,
Technology and the billionaires and the governments and all the experts will fix it. So actually, psychology proves you entirely wrong. And actually, to believe that, oh shit, is actually a massive motivating factor. Now the t-shirt over there is Doomster, which means master of doom, which means you become post-doom. You have this fear, you allow it, you think, oh my God, we don't know how bad it's going to be. I don't know whether, planting my own vegetable plot's going to help. I don't know if joining Extinction Rebellion to demand the end of fossil fuels is going to help. I don't know, and I'm scared, but I want to act, and I want to live the rest of my life in truth and in love and creativity. So it's post-doom, so that the new word is doomster. So that you don't get apathetic and stuck, or whatever, and just keep screaming about how bad it is. You get on with a new kind of way of life, which is, I'm going to do stuff, and it may or may not work, but I believe it's a good thing to do. So we've invented the term doomster for this more agentic, creative sort of master of doom. The problem is top climatologists and Al Gore, you mentioned him earlier, still like to tell us that technology will fix everything and calm down. They don't want us to rebel. And the work that I'm doing is inviting us to see how bad it is and therefore rebel. And so for me, the entire environmental movement is greenwash, not just corporations.
And you'll talk about that later?
If you ask me to. I want to come back to something, but I will. I'll stick with the format. Deep adaptation. Yes, so deep adaptation was the title of a paper I wrote in 2018 after I took a year out from my professorship, unpaid leave, to actually look at the climate science, because I'd only studied climate science properly previously to that in 1993-94 as an undergraduate at Cambridge in the UK. And I was beginning to see, since 2012, I was beginning to see changes in our environment that reminded me of the things that were being predicted back in 1993 about if climate change got really bad, by the amount of loss of ice in the Arctic, the permafrost melting, tundra forests catching fire. And it was, so I really got scared because I had that context. I took a year out, I looked at the climate science, and I realized the IPCC was excluding so much incredibly relevant studies and data because of the desire to create consensus. And so actually, we had a watered down message. They had understated for decades the existential risk that we're facing. So that's what I discovered. I published a deep adaptation paper. It went viral, over 1 million downloads, and it helped trigger a new wave of environmental activism in the West, particularly in Europe, called Extinction Rebellion, where we were seeing climate as not some distant threat in the future for grandkids, not just about polar bears, but actually we may all die of hunger in the next decade or two. It was a massive shift in the understanding and talking about what climate change is and why it matters to us. So on the back of that, because I started getting overwhelmed by the inquiries, I decided to put people together to talk to each other. I didn't know what we should be doing about this. My paper was just, oh look, it's this bad. My work on sustainability has been a bit of a fraud based on false premises. Deep adaptation is basically saying that climate change is going to so disrupt modern societies, life as we live it today, that we can't just adapt through a few higher sea walls and choosing slightly different drought-hardy crops. It's actually going to fundamentally undermine industrial consumer societies. Our lives will be different. We'll have all manner of societal disruptions, and therefore, It challenges everything. It challenges our understanding of progress, of human dominion. It challenges all our assumptions about what we're saving for. If you've got a pension, it actually creates this kind of existential terror and near-death experience for people. So what so many people who read the deep adaptation paper then had was this kind of dark night of the soul. And they needed to meet with each other and talk about it and reconstitute their sense of identity and their sense of purpose for the rest of their lives. With no longer all these nice, easy ideas about the future. It also triggered this almost repulsion for so much of what we are told to admire in society today. We're told to admire hierarchy, we're told to admire wealthy people, we're told that life is competitive and we have to like squabble and fight and sell ourselves. And so basically when you look at why we got into this mess, it's this deep repulsion of how could we have done this to each other and to nature. So it was a forum to bring those people together. And so now it's a worldwide network and a worldwide movement. It's become a bit demonized with the whole anti-doomer message. People are not apathetic. It's amazing what people are doing. People are becoming activists. People are starting regenerative organic farms. People are doing all manner of amazing things precisely because they no longer believe that the elites and technology and politicians are going to do anything useful.
Yeah, that's good to know. Actually, it's really inspiring.
Mainly by burning coal, then you're doing worse damage to the environment. So that's the first thing on, if we're talking about greenwashing.
So also,
I will continue and you can come back. The second thing is, if all cars in the UK, 1% of the world's population, were electric, that would use up the double the entire production of cobalt for the batteries. It is a total lie to tell people that we can be happy because EVs are taking off. The world uses, so 83% of current energy on the planet comes from fossil fuels. Yes, we use electricity at home, so we can imagine that somehow that's not the case. So we live in a hydrocarbon civilization, and net zero is a lie. The politicians are lying about when they're going to achieve it, and the activists have been lying about it. They think that it's actually possible. The shifting tide, so I worked with activists for the last 5 years, the shifting tide is that activists are finally being brutally honest with themselves and each other about reality. They see the data. 2023 is going to be 1.5C above pre-industrial levels, which is decades in advance of all the top scientists in the IPCC. We are already in a world where we have uncontrollable climate change because that, through the science, has been shown to trigger self-amplifying feedbacks. We are facing a horrible future, and more horrible for some than others. There's still so much we can do by accepting that, not by talking about, let's be happy about electric vehicles. I'm sorry. So what a big shift is happening in activism is we're realizing it's pointless to talk to privileged middle-class people anymore. We've been doing that for 40 years and it's done nothing. The environmental issue always should have been a political, revolutionary agenda, and that is what the environmental movement's coming to realize. So, back to the first question, what people like us need to do is stop talking to each other, talk to the people who work here and say, actually, climate change is simple, not complex. The elites and the rich destroyed the planet, they destroyed the forest, they polluted the waters and the atmosphere through their greed, through exploitative systems, and that is destroying your future as young people, and you absolutely can be angry and you can blame them. The question then is, how do you live with that and how do you move through that into something beyond anger and blame? But don't get told to not be angry and not blame, because absolutely there is anger and there is blame. It's just not the way to then live the rest of your lives. So we have to move through that. We don't move through that. We don't be honest with young people about the situation by pretending that electric vehicles are something to be excited about.
Let me give
No, I'll respond.
Please do.
I never said I was excited about it. B, I talked very clearly about moving the needle in the right direction, which is what we should be doing. So I think when it comes to messaging, we have done a horrible job giving people the information they need to make the right decisions. The things are changing. You mentioned this already. So people are having access to more information and they are making the informed decisions to do that. But I think our point now is after 60 plus years of the modern environmental movement, if people don't know what's going on, if they're not aware, I think they're purposely having their heads in the sand. So now our goal should not, in the words of a marketer, no longer be about driving the impressions, it should be about converting into action. Raise your hand if you're a vegan. 1. Raise your hand if you're willing to go live off the grid. Okay, good. Raise your hand if you have a regenerative farm at home. Raise your hand if you compost. A few people, great. This room are people that are committed to the cause. That's why you're all here right now this morning. But even within this group, there is a small percentage of you that are doing these things that I would label as more extreme, which is why I focus so much on A, working with the private sector as the major stakeholder to drive change, but for everybody else, giving you practical things that you can do that are realistic with our everyday lives. Again, reiterating the fact that yes, I understand this comes from a position of privilege. I understand that people in the developing world are experiencing this very differently than everybody else. My decade in China certainly proved that, where you breathe in toxic air, you ingest toxic water and toxic food day in and day out. So the issues are quite palpable there. So I totally understand from that perspective. But I think certainly we are speaking the same language, even though for some of you it might not seem like it. We are saying the same thing. We're just focused on 2 different stakeholder groups. But we are both obviously very passionate about building a sustainable future for everybody.
Breaking together, Satish Kumar, who's a very close friend of Vandana Shiva, so she's here tomorrow, isn't she? He says, quite, understatedly, this is a prophetic book. And Nyambura Mbao from Kenya, who does agroforestry, she says, this book shows that instead of imposing elitist schemes and scams, regenerating nature and culture together is the way forward. And a co-founder of that activist group, Claire Farrell, the activist group is Extinction Rebellion, said, if you want to save some of the world, but hate being told what to do, this book is for you.
So it's available here at the festival?
Yeah, it's available in the bookshop, but also, because I mean this, you can download it for free as an EPUB from my website.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you.
We greenwash modernity. I call it imperial modernity in the book. Which is basically this interlocking set of systems and assumptions in politics, economics, culture, which basically cajole us or even often coerce us to succeed in life by giving more power to the hierarchies. And that, in the modern incarnation, is global capitalism. There's been previous incarnations of it, but it's founded on some lies like anthropocentrism, so that we are the center of the universe. So the notion of separation, that we're actually somehow separate and different from wider life. The notion of progress, that somehow progress exists and will always occur, we're always moving forward, and that is a ridiculous notion. It means that we don't learn from indigenous cultures and ancient cultures. So all manner of things that kind of form the world that everyone's grown up with, even outside of the West, because obviously Western culture was globalized and so many people have urban lives and are exposed to that culture. So the whole way that we experience life has been greenwashed with the lie that we can somehow manage a transition of how we live into a sustainable, renewably powered life. I'll give you one statistic that backs that up. I read one study in 2019, and it said in 2018, the global increase in energy demand is the same as all energy ever produced in the history of photovoltaics, solar power. So this idea that there's some kind of energy transition happening or possible is nonsense. So renewable energy is great, but it's only adding to the amount of energy. It's not displacing fossil fuels one bit. So got a real problem. Basically, societies have to power down, and the rich must be made to go first. They won't do it themselves. You can wonder whether you're the rich when I say that. So therefore, my book is actually explicitly anti-imperialist. It's calling for neo-protectionism from the global south to stop cheap resources going to rich places, because the rich people will not voluntarily choose to reduce their consumption and destruction and emissions. And so any other story like, oh, let's just promote degrowth in the West and all vote to reduce our consumption, not going to happen. Green one. Yeah, so I actually made a short film on talking to young people, so from the age of 13 to 17, in school, about the worst case climate scenarios. So I am seen publicly as someone who's talking about the worst case scenarios. However, even my anticipation of the speed and damage of climate change that I published 5 years ago was a few years late. So I anticipated what's happening now to be happening in about 2 more years from now. But anyway, I went into school here in Indonesia, the Green School, and we had dialogues, and then we made a short film of talking about these things. And what I discovered is that actually these young people were more open to considering these worst case scenarios as a possibility that they might have to then integrate and choose what to do with their lives. More open to it than older people, because older people have more psychologically invested in things as they are. And so many old people are gaslighting young people, saying, you've got a motivation problem, you're too doomist, you're too negative. We've got a mental health problem with young people, we need to get them more positive about the future. No, they're right, you're wrong. Listen to them and cry with them about what's happened and what's to come. And from that place, beauty can emerge and awesome things can emerge. So yeah, I've created a regenerative farm school here. We're starting training smallholders north of Tampak Siring in these methods, and finding that there's so much appetite for that because people don't want to poison their own lands. But what I really want to do is find funding to actually then work with all the local schools in the area and partner with them and help schools start small regenerative plots in their farms, in their schools, to make this real and tangible. It's possible to do something useful, it's possible to relocalize supply chains, it's possible to become a bit more resilient to future shocks as global economics gets disrupted. And in the process, you're restoring, regenerating biodiversity. And so, it's good in the moment and it will help you as things break down later.